Hello and welcome back to a Heartsvine 4 Dev Diary. It's been a while since I've seen one of these on my feed. So, evidently, this is a France rework. We don't know what the title of the DLC is. I can have a guess it's something to do with espionage, but we'll get onto that later. So, before we even talk about this tree, let's just establish one thing. There's a lot of thoughts about what are the sort of countries that are going to be getting trees. When I first thought about it way back when, my guess was France, Spain, Soviets, Finland. But after looking at what has been discussed and what the devs have said, I think that you're more likely to get the following four: France, Spain, Italy, and then I'm probably going to say Greece. Greece is going to be my last pick. That's the most uncertain one. The other three, I'm almost certain about. But I guess time will tell, eh? Time will tell. Anyway, let's get into it. I'm sure all those reasonings for those picks will come into it later. Okay, so instead of reading, there's a whole dev diary here that you can read. But I don't really need to read it. I can just look at the focus tree myself and explain it to you just by zooming in. So here we go. So it's pretty much the same sort of deal with a focus tree that you know. It falls into the generic structure of there's an industry tree, a political tree, an army tree, etc, etc. It's all just a bit more expanded, which is in some places good, in other places I think it could be improved. So here's the industrial tree, like the original industrial tree. I think it's great. I think it's fantastic. So what you've got here is I think you can see my cursor. I don't know what devaluing the franc will do, but the point is that of this you have these investment trees, or focuses, and these sort of allow you to build building slots in those states, and then if you have built them, you do the relevant focus, and then you get the factories into those states. So in theory, this is sort of an investment and then payoff scheme, which I think is great. I think needs to be done more, to be honest, because it's so simple to just say, build factories here, done, instead of, you know, having to weigh up the time element of, I want to invest here or should I? There's not so much I can push on with this. I think that the global integration focus could be interesting because I'm not 100% sure what that's about. And I'd also say that we're actually missing two focuses. In this whole tree, I can't find it. Unless I'm blind and you want to tell me where it is. There is the jet rockets and the France pursues nuclear technology focuses. They're gone. It was the fundamental way of you had to do one of those to get your second additional research slot backed behind 75 factories, and it's not here. So no more nuclear France, I suppose. Never mind. Moving on. So this is the army tree. This is basically identical. It sort of alludes to a few things. It's kind of been doubled as far as I can see. It's literally they've just added more on both sides. Weirdly, the aggressive tree has a section added on for air dominance, which is strange because later on in the tree there's another focus tree sort of section for air, so I don't get that. But that's fine, whatever, we will work with it. But yeah, it's pretty much the same. My thought was that if you are going down defensive, which is atypical of sort of historical France, and you went down methodical, although I don't know how far they overlap each other, the extending the Maginot across to Belgium and such gave a negative opinion factor towards Belgium, which before was optional, but now it appears to be mandatory if you want to get army reform. So the poor Belgians. I also see this division and then a word I can't pronounce, curiace, perhaps. I don't know what that is. I assume it's just a tank variation that you get instantly and as a research, and it has additional buffs. But other than that, it seems to be pretty much the same. So very good industry, Very identical military. Okay, and now we head into politics, which is, generally speaking, what everybody seems to care about. So from what I understand, they're going with a sense of, instead of radical change from we're democratic to we're full-blown Nazi, they're going down you sort of lean towards the left, and then you either fully commit to communism or you find a middle ground in being a left-wing party. And that's exactly what's going on here. You start off by doing the communist build-up, strengthening the unions, believing in women's suffrage, which is, you could say full-blown left-wing, but they're generally quite timid left-wing policies. Some of them should be more accepted, but anyway. And then force the issue, push the line, you decide, are you going full-blown communism, which I think is the right tree? You've got the middle ground where you just agree to Moscow. And I think the left wing is the more timid sort of communist tree. I don't even know if this counts as communism in the end, whether it will be a communist tree or just a democracy with communist elements. I assume they must all force you to go communist. It'd be weird if they didn't. As for what some of these tree focuses do, I'm not 100% sure. We can quickly go. Let me guess. Manpower, factories, building slots, stability, more stability, some sort of war against Spain in case the fascists win. You can sort of work it out just by looking at the titles. The only one I don't really get is this one. I don't know what égalité, liberté, solidarité means. I know it's a work off the French slogan, but I don't know what it'll do. Moving on, let's not dwindle. Ban the leagues. I have no idea what that does. I assume it could be anything. So please, if you know, tell me what it is. I haven't seen anybody talking about what it is. Maybe it's obvious. I've got no idea. What is weird is there is a second industrial tree here, which I quite like. I think it's right that your politics also determines how your industry comes out, instead of having a generic industrial tree that just works its way through. So yeah, you get more factories, more military, and I'm not quite sure how far we go. I assume this is more mills to just build planes. But yeah, I like it. I think it's right. Moving across, we have got a immigration tree. Immigration is going to be sort of a key component for France, considering they lost all their soldiers in the First World War. So you'll have to decide whether you want to sort of suffer the consequences of immigration in terms of stability against just having no manpower. And this kind of works as an idea. I do wonder if this leads to some sort of faction, or if this is just a placeholder icon, but French Union doesn't mean forming a French Union with a different country. I'm not 100% sure. Is it wrong to say that I think it would be cool if you could get cores on places like Algeria, by sort of reintegrating a renewed French identity with its colonial empire? But, it's all work in the pipeline, I suppose. Intervention in Spain, this was in the base game, but you'd have to go communist or fascist to help. But I do think it's good, because currently, if you play multiplayer, the game is dominated by, if the Germans can out-micro, and the Italians, but their tanks leave something to be desired. Particularly, can the Germans out-micro the 5 Soviet tank divisions? Now, in my multiplayer games, I'm usually on top of it, but having France help, I'm not sure which side they go. I guess they could go either way. This could completely change how, early game 36 Spanish Civil Wars go. I'm not saying I'm concerned, I'm just saying it could be interesting. So to do this, it's good to bring up that it will reduce stability. And the big part of this whole France being sort of an unstable country is that if you have less than 25% stability, you are going to have a civil war, period. It's a non-negotiable. Which sort of is weird at the same time, because sometimes you want to have low stability. So I wonder, if you have that civil war, but you're going communist anyway, is the communist going to be your enemy, despite the fact you were going communist, just because you have low stability? I'm not 100% sure. I assume it does work like that, because that's base game. Anyway, down here, what have we got? We've got some democracy, which seems to be, as far as I can see, accessible from both sides. So whether you're left wing or right wing, democracy is still available. Supporting the Finns, nice little bit of addition there. Now this is the part where I do sort of move into criticism. So I think the Little Entente section of the democratic focus tree is great. I think it's great for the same reasons I thought the industrial tree was great, because you build up this sort of small faction, you sort of work your way through, get a few guarantees going on, but then you don't just stop at inviting people, you sort of begin to invest in them, which I kind of wish the focus tree went on. You know, you bring in Yugoslavia, you say, right, we want to give them docks and some convoys because we need to trade with them, and then you give them factories, and then you work with Romania and you do the same there. I think that if they expanded on that, I think you could have a really solid, thick tree with like 7 Cs, but I'm happy with it as it is. Where I'm less happy is on this side, the buy time, because this is the historical tree, this is what France did. And if you move down here, you go with Britain, and then you just sort of stop. You purchase things. Like, if you go alone, this has the option to eventually get Britain into your faction. If you just go with Britain, it just sort of ends. I don't know, it doesn't feel as cool as it could do, perhaps. But never mind, I'm sure we won't be crying so much. There's the other alternative where you work with Italy, which I think was a lot harder to form the stressor front because of differences between the 3 of them, Italy, France and the UK. So I'm sure that sort of revitalising that alliance by giving away your colonial territories to Italy will be I think it'll be overpowered, to be quite straightforward, but I don't think it'll be game ending in terms of the meta, unlike Japan in Waking the Tiger. Anyway, so here's essentially, I think this is the alternative industrial tree, because you've got the main one, and then over on the liberal side we have the nationalised key industry. I think this is the alternative for the right-wing side. I think it's probably going to be quite bog standard, pushes towards right-wing thinking, stability, war support. On here maybe some factories, and a nice option to immediately ban communism. I do quite like that. The sort of, if you want, you can straight away deal with that issue. I think that's quite good. Okay, and we're back with some right-wing trees, moving towards fascism. I think all of these are kind of moving towards fascism, although I'm very interested to see about this, but we'll get to that. We've got the National Regeneration, which is sort of, from my understanding, National Regeneration is an alternative to what Vichy France's government was kind of working on, but sort of a watered down version, moving through integralism. Integralism being the sort of thought that the ideas of the Catholic Church can intrinsically be connected to liberal views of democracy. It's a middle ground, essentially. Conservatism, hardcore conservatism meets democracy. But then, of course, there's the less, watered down version in the forms of just going straight forward fascist. So there's the original Woo Italy, which is the Latin Entente here, if you remember from the vanilla tree. Woo Italy, then Spain can join, Portugal can join, which is a nice additional feature. Your own war on Greece, having the natural borders of France, which I assume is conquering Belgium straightforward, getting a bit more land through there. And then I assume a war with Britain down here, so I think that's quite a solid tree, not too overpowered either. But then you've got the Towards a New Europe, which is going with Germany and splitting Belgium or inviting Belgium to the Axis before going to war with the UK to reclaim Quebec, which I think you can do from this tree, judging by the dotted line. This is applicable to both. Between the two, I think I prefer this one on the Latin Entente. I think going your own way seems to be better, and you usually can beat Germany in most cases as France, assuming you have allies, which is Italy. So I think that's fine. And this seems to be the big talking point of the tree, the monarchism. So there's three sort of houses to work off here. You go down monarchism, and then once you've got negative 35 stability, that's a requirement. Remembering that negative 25 is a civil war, you need to have less than 35. So that is really riding the middle ground. I look forward to the 7-year-olds losing in multiplayer and then crying because they failed to go not too far, but then getting a civil war anyway. So this is actually quite reminiscent of the Hungary tree, I feel, because they had 3 different types of monarchism as well, and I also feel like they're very similar in their paths. So there was like a democratic king for Hungary, and I think that's like the Orléans. The Orléans being the traditional French, in terms of French people ruling house. They are French at their heart, there's no concerns here, and they're quite chill in terms of having a constitution seen here. Ironically, when you work through their tree, the first action is just getting rid of fascism. So this is essentially going to be, I presume, go non-aligned, but work with Britain in the same regard to defeat fascism anyway, which is almost historical, basically. I would almost argue it's worth going that over going go with Britain, if this works how I think it's going to work. Because why is that tree so short? I have no idea. On the right, we've got the Bonaparte, good old Napoleon. I think this is going to be the fan favourite of this tree, because not only you've got Avenge Waterloo, hallmark, Return to Borodino, hallmark, and then Disunite Germany, which I think there should be an overlaid image here, is the ability to completely balkanise, in a way, Germany to its original sort of crowned territories, Prussia and the sort of Bavaria, you know. I think that could be very fun. I do wonder whether getting down the tree will require sort of a declaration immediately, or whether you just get the war goal for France and Germany, but you only need to go to war with Germany to do the Disunite Germany effect. We shall see. And finally, the last political tree, goodness me, this took longer than I thought, would be the legitimate heir, which is getting Alfonso, the King of Spain, out of Spain, and suggesting that the legitimists in France believe that he, through the long line of Charles's heirs, is the King of France as well as Spain, which in effect means that you can eventually unite Spain and France under one territory, which screams to me core territory, lots of manpower. I mean, I'm happy with that alone. You know, you just get France and Spain, 2 core territories, I'm happy. I think my only gripe with it is that how short it is a bit sad. I would have liked, you know, just maybe even 2 more focuses down here. But I'm sure it's not the end of the world. There's one more thing I'd say about this, which is I do wonder that in historically, sort of the whole point was that Alfonso was kicked from Spain because Francisco Franco didn't want to restore the monarchy. So I wonder that if that's going to be an element, if there was supposedly a Spanish focus tree, which I think there's going to be. So I wonder if that will be stopped if the Spanish choose to go monarchist themselves. Okay, the last 2 things. Very short, not going to talk about this much, because I don't think there's much to talk about. And I think that's quite weird. We just came off Man the Guns, and the size of this naval tree is very small. I'm really surprised. There's these 2 building naval dockyards focuses, and I feel like there just should be more. You know, the French Navy is sizable. I don't know why it does seem so minuscule here, but I don't think people particularly pay much attention to the French Navy. It just gets taken down anyway. And then the air focus tree is, I mean, this is sad, isn't it? It's so squeezed at the end that it barely exists in and of itself. I understand there was in the aggressive doctrine there was a whole section dedicated to Air Force, but this is it. I really am surprised. But never mind, that's fine. I'm happy with it. All in all, I think there's some great mechanics in the works. Let's just come off this and scroll to the bottom here. I think the focus tree is great. There's a lot of good mechanics. I think there's a few more things they're going to add, but I'll speak about that at the end. Quick thought, here are some of the advisors. Does anybody know who these two people are? I mean, I know who he is. He was a diplomat during World War II. He worked on the Cold War. He essentially did a lot of policies throughout the French, but what does hawk mean? I'm not sure. Again, I know what a technocrat is, but I'm not sure what they would be available for. Judging by the focuses that are available here, this seems to be democratic France. You know, sort of the fascist and propaganda things aren't available. So I wonder if these are just democratic options. Not 100% sure. Okay, here we are at the bottom. Last things to talk about. Armoured cars, probably going to be a research. Cool. Saw them in Road to 56, the mod. Happy to bring them in. More tech options is cool by me. Just hope that they balance, that there's only so many things you can research before war. I'll say that I'm almost certain that the Spanish tree is happening as a result of all of the focuses referencing Spain. It just seems like it's happening. I'd also say that civil wars seem to be talked about quite a bit, which means this entire sort of more DLC is going to be about espionage, which is resistance and occupation seen here, the civil wars, the sort of underlying issues within a country. And then lastly, something I think I may have accidentally glossed over is the fact that, according to this, there's going to be 3 more dev diaries talking about France, meaning that there's probably going to be focus trees for Free France and Vichy France, which I think is fantastic. I mean, you have a civil war, or you lose your territory to Vichy and Free France, and then you're stuck here. I'm not sure if this means you'll get a separate focus tree, or like an independent focus tree, like subsectioned into it, like a category appears. I think we'll find out in time. And I think that's everything. Oh goodness me, we've scrolled past everything. There we go. So yeah, if you don't think it's Greece as the last focus tree designation, let me know who you think it's going to be. Other bets are Turkey and Bulgaria, but I guess we'll see in time. So thank you for watching. I hope this wasn't too rambly. I know it was. If you enjoyed, hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.